So, what do you understand by indirect cycle? So, friends, in today's session, we'll be looking into indirect cycle and what are the parameters that are getting involved in case of an indirect cycle. The execution of an instruction may involve one or more operands in memory, each of which requires a memory access. Further, if indirect addressing is used, then additional amount of memory access are being required. So whenever the indirect addressing is required, more amount of memory is required. So the execution of an instruction may involve one or more operands. So what are the operands? Whether it is a read operation, write operation, those are called as the operands, which may require a memory access. Further, if indirect addressing is used, then additional memory accesses are being required for the process. So it require additional memory accesses for the process. For fetching the indirect addresses as one or more instruction, sub-cycles are required. So the instruction gets executed in the form of sub-cycles, because if the instructions are being interdependent on each other, then sub-cycle plays a very important role. After an instruction is fetched, it is examined to determine if any indirect addressing is involved, and if so, then the operands will directly fetch the interrupt, will be used for fetching and using of the indirect addressing. So when you look at this diagram, it consists of fetch, indirect, execute, and interrupt. The main line of activity consists of alternating instruction fetch and instruction execution activity. After an instruction is being fetched, it will decide whether the instruction is being coming from an mode which is the indirect mode. If it is an indirect addressing, then an interrupt will be required and the interrupt will be made active for the position. So this is how the execution cycle of an interrupt looks like. Now let us look at the instruction cycle state diagram. This illustrates more correctly the nature of an instruction cycle. Once an instruction is fetched, its operand specifiers must be identified. Each input operand in memory is then fetched, and this process may require indirect addressing. Register-based operand need not fetch. Once the opcode is executed, a similar process will be needed to store the result into the main memory. Now, what is instruction address calculation? We call it as IAC. It will determine the address of the next instruction to be executed, to be calculated. It usually involves adding a fixed number of address to the previous instruction. Now, when we add a fixed number of address to the previous instruction, it indicates that the new address will be allocated to the memory and the pointer will be pointing towards a new address so that the execution can be faster. Then we have instruction fetch, read instruction from its memory location into the processor. So from memory, you are required to read the instructions into the processor. Instruction operation decoding, analyze the instruction to determine the type of operations to be performed and to be used. What type of operation to be performed and what type of operation to be used is done with the help of instruction operating and decoding. Operand address calculation. If the operation involves refer to an operand in memory or available via I/O, then it determines the address of the operand, what needs to be performed and where the data needs to be stored. Operand fetch the operand from memory and read it from in memory, and it will do the operation considering the I/O devices. Data operation, perform the operation indicated in the instruction. Operation store, write the result into memory or out to input and output devices. Now, instruction interpreting and sequencing. Each processor has some basic type of instructions like data transfer instruction, arithmetic and logical instruction, branch instruction, and so on. To perform a particular task, it is the job of the computer programmer to select, read, and write appropriate instructions one after another. This job of programmer is known as instruction sequencing. So here the job of the programmer is called instruction sequencing, which can be called as straight line sequencing, and it will also be called as your branch instruction.